All right, everyone, you may have seen that in the last 48 to 72 hours, there's been an awful lot of hedging of bets by people that have been saying consistently for months Trump has no chance, Biden's going to have a landslide victory, we're going to flip Texas and Arizona and Florida and everywhere else on earth. But you're seeing them begin to sort of peter out in their bravado. Like, there's a link in the description here to what Bernie Sanders was talking about. It's a Newsweek article talking about how he's basically hedging his bets. He's saying, whoa, the Democratic Party has become the party of coastal elites. Now, why in the wee hours before the election, why at the 11 and a half hour would you come out and criticize the party? Wouldn't you wait until after the election? I would think that if you expect Biden to win, if you're really like your 99% chance of Biden winning, you wouldn't want to potentially endanger having a position by coming out and saying such a thing. No, you would want street cred if you expect there's at least some chance of Biden losing, so that you can say, well, I told you that the Democratic Party had become the party of coastal elites. Biden lost because he didn't appeal to the working class. He didn't appeal to young voters. He didn't appeal to, and the list goes on and on. It's hedging of bets. We've seen this from Nate Silver. We've seen this from other people. I've been consistent. Right or wrong, I'm still predicting that Trump has an 80% roughly chance of winning. Now, that's hedging in the sense that it's not a 99% chance like it was in 2016. I'll explain that in my final election predictions, which will be coming tomorrow. That being said, I'm not at the 11th hour going to say, well, if Trump loses, here's 10 reasons why. Because that just looks like hedging. It just doesn't look good. I'm seeing this almost across the board, and you may have seen like Scott Adams actually looks like a sage as well, because you saw maybe the other day CNN actually for the first time in, I don't know, a year or so, actually aired an article. It's an opinion piece, but actually aired an article by someone arguing that Trump deserves re-election. This comports to what he said, which was that towards the end of the election, some of these legacy media firms would essentially flip. And the reason why is quite clear. Let's say that Joe Biden wins. What the hell is the MSM going to bitch about for the next 4 years? They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. They'll be generally pleased, I think, with the globalistic trajectory of the country, shielding their multinational corporate owners. But they won't have much to write about. What are they going to talk about? They're going to have to recycle Trump stories. And, for a little while, it's fine because they can talk about, well, here's Trump looking disheveled on his golf course. Trump closed a condo project. Trump has been disgraced. He's got an asterisk after his disastrous one-term presidency. They can do that. That's only novel for so long. At some point, the average voter is going to say, well, Trump's no longer president, so why are we still talking about him? What is Biden doing for us? Biden would be essentially a lame duck from day one if the Republicans hold the Senate anyway. They'll completely obstruct him if McConnell's leading them. And they'd be right to, by the way, absolutely. Every step of the way, the Republicans, if they have any legislative capabilities at all, need to lock, stock, and barrel obstruct anything that a Biden presidency does if he's elected. But it doesn't look like there's quite as much bravado anymore as there was a few months ago. They were saying, well, we can flip every state. Trump will lose everything. We will disgrace him, totally annihilate him. And now you've got like people inside the campaign saying, well, our own internal polls don't show us with these double-digit leads nationwide. You got to get out and vote because things are close. Well, they are. And by the way, the polling gap has been narrowing over the last few days. Trump's now above 45% approval for the first time in quite some time. He's on the rise again. This is what I predicted. In the 11th hour of elections, typically you get a sharp narrowing in the polls. You've got late deciders, you've got people who were on the fence, and, statistically, some of them go one way, some of them go the other. It looks like more of them are favoring Trump. That makes sense. That's the advantage of incumbency. A lot of people, they're more hesitant to change boats in the middle of the river. This is especially true if you've got a war going on, and Trump has somewhat successfully attempted to cast off COVID as a war, although not completely. Doesn't take in the Dem partisans or people on the left. Certainly helps with his core fan base, because he can always just say, well, it's the China virus and the Democrats didn't want my lockdowns at all. The amount of hedging, though, that I'm seeing is palpable. And I suspect, based on the early results that we're getting on polling, number one, if you take it seriously at all, and also in early voting slash mail-in ballots. What I think is happening is that Biden's increase over 2016 is coming, he's underperforming with Hispanic and black voters. So that should be ringing alarm bells, especially if they want to compete in Georgia or Florida, certainly parts of Texas. That's number one. I have a feeling that Biden's main pickup is young and very low voting turnout among this bloc, among literally all of them, young college-age white liberals. Well, that's great. He's getting more votes potentially than Hillary among that bloc, but they vote at such low rates. I think that the trade-off is a negative thing for the Democratic Party, in all things considered. Now, it could be that on election night, Biden runs away with it, and, obviously the analysis is wrong. The polls weren't as wrong as 2016. Trump didn't get a boost at all. Maybe Biden gets a boost. I just don't see it in the behavior of people that back Biden. People that are in politics, pundit class, individuals, pollsters and so forth, people that have more of a finger on the pulse of things. They don't seem to be acting commensurate with expecting to have a big win. I think that they're expecting that if Biden wins, it'll be a lot closer than the polls would suggest. Do I believe that Biden is going to pick up all the states that he is technically ahead in? No. He'd be lucky to get half of them, in my opinion. Again, due to turnout differentials, late breakers, potentially the fickleness of the voting bloc that he appears to be doing well with, and also basically the wild card in this whole election. And what really makes it a lot more difficult to judge is the mail-in situation. We've got lagging returns on the number of ballots requested was huge. The number that have actually been returned is actually quite underwhelming. If you assume that that is a bulk of Biden voters who are not going to the polls on election day, this would be a symptom of the malaise of the Democrats I've spoken of now for 2 years, which is that they're just not really with it. Sure, they don't like Trump, but ultimately at the end of the day, will that motivate enough of them to turn out to vote to actually make the polls real on anything but paper? I don't expect that it will be. I expect that Trump's fans, by and large, are much more enthusiastic. And really, this election boils down to Trump. This election is the culmination of Trump. It's not about Biden versus Trump. It's a referendum on Trump's behavior, his policies, his COVID response, his foreign policy, the economy, and things related to him. Half the Democrats I talk to can't name a single thing that Biden intends to do. They say, well, Biden's a great guy. He's got this long record. Well, name an accomplishment. Oh, they don't know. They can't name it off the top of their head. Somebody will always come in and post the same infographic they've been using for the last 6 fucking months. But that's basically it. So I'm not surprised that Bernie Sanders especially would throw the party under the bus in order to hopefully save some face if Biden loses. Now, does he expect that? No. But I think he's looking at it as more of a 70-30 or a 60-40 proposition, so he's hedging. He's not particularly confident in Biden winning. He's not as confident as certainly like I would be in Trump winning. There's a possibility Biden wins. The polls could end up being spot on. It's just that would be historically unlikely. I think all indicators point to that not being the case. It'd be really funny. It'd be funny if Biden outperforms. Actually crushes Trump in like Arkansas and places like that. That would certainly be a stinging rebuke. I just don't think that it's particularly likely. I don't see this kind of hedging from the Trump fans. They've still got their MAGA hats on and they're waving the American flag in one hand, the blue line flag in the other with the Gadsden flag draped around their shoulders. The Democratic fans, by and large, the left, they're kind of enthusiastic, but they keep talking about how they actually physically expect Biden to turn his back on them if elected. By the way, they're correct in the surmising. When people like the Amazing Atheist are worrying about that, your concerns are legitimate. I can also guarantee you that even if you have a movement like Occupy, you're not going to get him to do jack for you. He is not a leftist. He's not going to do any of the things that he's winking and nudging at you about. There's a reason that he won't take strong positions on any issue. It's because he's full of fucking goddamn shit. I can point to almost 50 years of his career being full of fucking goddamn shit. That's Joe Biden in a goddamn nutshell. People who are young, like college liberals, like, would be, for the millennials would have been the 2008 Obama voters, they're kind of enthusiastic, but they turn out at very, very low levels. Other than that, I can't think of a bloc that's enthusiastic. The only thing motivating them is that they don't like Trump. Will that be enough? Will a group of people that hates Trump override a group of people of at least proportional size that really, really loves him because he's got legendary levels of in-party support and an extra 6-point enthusiasm gap on top, supposedly, of what existed in 2016. If that gap disappears, if the turnout's not there, Trump will lose. Just to be clear, if the polls are close to correct, Trump loses. I just don't expect that to be the case when all things are considered at the end of the night. Could be wrong. If that happens, I'll take my lumps. So, look, we'll basically know the trajectory once we get the Florida results. Trump will either come in ahead, behind, or at the same level that he's polling at in Florida. We'll know that fairly quickly, plus an additional hour for 6 of the extremely red counties there. This, by the way, is why when people were calling Florida for Hillary Clinton in the first hour the last time around, I was laughing at them and saying no, it was going to go for Trump, and everyone thought that was miraculous. It's because, I believe it's because of time zones, to tell the truth. If I remember correctly, those 6 counties they come in an hour later. They're rural, they're extremely red. They're basically Alabama and Mississippi that were stolen from Alabama and Mississippi. You can call it that way. Which one's the one on the right? Alabama and Mississippi look like a ball sack connected to Florida, which is the USA's cock. Makes sense considering the politics of that particular region. No offense to the residents there, but Florida's like the most corrupt spot on earth. You might as well just be annexed by Venezuela at this point. I don't think the Cuban community would like that very much. The other wild card is the Hispanic vote. Trump appears to be performing considerably better with that voting bloc than he did in 2016, and Biden is lagging behind. That would be devastating for the Democrats, especially if that trickles down ballot. Well, the Democrats can't win the Senate without having considerable support there, especially, again, based on turnout. That's about all. Peace out.